Good afternoon, everyone. Bill Brownchick here, host of Creative Real Estate Financing Group on Facebook, and those of you watching on YouTube, the Legal Wiz channel. And for those of you watching on my regular Facebook page, welcome. This is a session that I'm going to be doing every week called Real Deals with Real People, real investors, and who are going to talk about their best, most creative, most fun deals and how they found them, how they negotiated them, how they financed them, and how they overcome adversity to make lots of money in real estate. So this is to educate and inspire you and give you ideas for your deal. So with me today, I have Ray Cooper, who is an old friend of mine, a colleague, a mentor, a co-author on my book, How to Sell a House Fast in the Slow Real Estate Market, which really doesn't apply right now, but it'll come back.
It works in any market. Works in any market.
That's right. But the top that we're going to rename it, How to Sell a House for Top Dollar in Any Market. You know, that make it more timely. But we wrote it in 2009 when things were really bad, and it's still a great book. We get a lot of great reviews on it on Amazon, so check it out. So Ray has been a real estate broker, investor, developer, entrepreneur for 35 plus years. And, you know, we talk all the time and bounce ideas around because he's such a creative mind. I mean, if there's not a box big enough in this world for him not to think outside of. So without further ado, welcome, Mr. Cooper.
Hello, Bill. How are you? And hello, everybody out there. So my most creative real estate deal, I would have to say, starting with
let's start with your first. Let's start with your first deal.
My first real estate deal. So that's when I was a tenant, a small tenant in a real estate building. I was a real estate agent. I had just gotten my license for like 2 years, and I was fortunate enough to hook up with the top local real estate attorneys. And those guys are pretty well connected. Even though they don't practice brokerage, they're always connected with the local deals. And they were kind of have their nose to the grindstone. And this is back in the day before people really knew what like pre-market listings were. The attorneys hear from their clients who's thinking of selling what. And he was a tenant actually in a small building. He had a business. Videos for kids business. It was kind of funny. It was a total fail. And he had leased a small office in the building and he wanted to get out of the lease. So he convinced me to open my own real estate office only after a couple of years being an agent. And I started really, with really no money. Things were tough for us. But I agreed. We split the rent. I'm in the building. And then he lets me know while I'm there after a couple of years that he wants out of the lease and that I'm going to have to pay the lease. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, my goodness, I can barely afford to pay half. Long story short, I find out that the owner of the building wants to sell it. And he's a commercial real estate guy, but there was some residential component to the building. There was some apartments, and he wasn't very active, and I was on MLS. So he wanted me to list the property for him, and it was just a terrible market. It was in the early 90s. And after about 6-7 months on the market, it was almost impossible to sell the building. And he suggested to me that we could use a commercial lender and do some creative financing where he would hold a note and we would try to get me qualified to buy the building. And I'm like, that's impossible. The building's half empty. So he gave me 6 months and I rented out as many offices as I could in the building and was able to develop enough cash flow in the building to be able to show enough income to qualify for a mortgage. And it was brutal, let me tell you. But we got qualified for the mortgage, had to do some work in the building before putting it up for sale. And after collecting the rents, it actually turned out that I had a positive cash flow in the building. And that's the first property that gave me my opportunity to start building some equity and start moving on to other properties. And, they say sometimes too much education, too much knowledge is dangerous. But in this case, it worked out good being totally ignorant, because if I looked at that deal today, I probably would have never done it. But real estate deals, real estate tends to appreciate if you're an end user, especially.
Yeah. Did you get a commercial loan on that property?
Yeah. It was through Greenpoint Savings Bank. Right. And they did a commercial loan. I think it was 14% interest rate. It was ridiculous. It was a 15-year. The points was ridiculous. I mean, it was insane. But I hustled. I think there was in the building, we had about maybe 9 offices upstairs, 4 or 5 downstairs, a couple of apartments, 3 apartments in the building total. And it was tough. It was really tough to get that happening, especially since I had no income. But the bank was willing to use the leases from the tenants as income. And you know what? It worked. It was unbelievable, but we were able to hustle up and get a bunch of tenants in that building and show enough income to substantiate a loan. That was my first creative one. That was really out of the box. But being an end user and using space in it, and then I expanded and then I built my real estate office, which brokerage businesses can be profitable, but really the goal is for anybody out there, if you are agents, you got to buy and sell real estate. There's no other way to really make money in the business. I mean, that's the reason why you're really in the business, especially your primary residences. Those are fantastic because as a married couple, you can take up to $500,000 tax-free, and per individual $250 tax-free. And being in the front lines, having an agency license, as a matter of fact, most of the solicitations we do and marketing we do is to help clients buying and selling properties, through our top agent guaranteed thing, finding the top agents that are most well connected. And if the clients don't find something that they like, or say they find a deal, but it's not a fit for them, they're sort of our eyes and ears out there looking for stuff. And that's how we have then found our best deals. And I learned that early on, that staying in connections with the top local agents and then expanding to my county, not only my town, but the county, the state, and now we do the whole country. We're looking for those top agents that are performing, that have access to the deals before everybody else. And we've noticed, you guys have all heard about this pocket listing thing. Technically, it's not something the agents are really allowed to do, but they're all doing it. What they do is, we'll call it the 1 minute listing. The 1 minute that property goes on the market, they do a blast text or email to all their customers so that they get access to it first. And that's how the business really happens. It's a who knows whose business, and getting to the front of the line, getting access to those properties. Because once it goes on MLS, especially today, I mean, it's always been the case. That's why we do work with the top attorneys and the top title companies and commercial brokers that don't do residential, but have a lot of business going on, that don't really practice. They also have access to good deals. So that was probably my first opening into the industry and doing real estate, starting not with residential, but started with like commercial.
Right. In this day and age, is it worth, a lot of people ask me, is it worth becoming a real estate agent or broker as an investor?
Only for access. To me personally, the profits we have made, it's the ancillary part of the business. If you said, hey, Ray, how do you really make money in real estate? It's buying, fixing, and flipping properties. Really, that's what it is. The advantage as an agent or as a broker is that you get access to these properties. You get access to seeing the deals and what's out there. And of course, you recruit your whole family. I had my mom, her husband, my wife, my kids, everybody socializing, in the schools. My wife had connected me with people she knew in the schools, and they gave us some of our best leads because they knew people that were thinking about moving before it gets on the market. And that getting access to that kind of information is really critical in real estate. Right. And not to say that the owner should put it on MLS and get the full exposure out there, but getting there first, getting to that listing before everybody else is really critical.
Right. I always tell people worry about, there's so much competition with investors. No, there isn't. The competition is listing agents. That's the competition. You got to get to that for sale by owner before a listing broker gets to them. He tells them that, you can get much more, which is true, but not the number that they're telling them.
In fact, ironically, funny story, my wife had backed over a mailbox. She had backed up the truck, hit a mailbox, knocked the mailbox down. And she had a friend who was a builder in the neighborhood who was from Long Island. We had moved from Long Island down to North Carolina. And she says to me, hey, call up our friend Rob and see if you can, if you can fix the mailbox, whatever. Right. So while we're there, he says to me, hey, what do you do? And I said, well, he says, I need some money. I got a lot that I want to buy. I said, well, you know what? We could fund it. We did it through a pension fund that I had that we still have. And he says to me, I think it's a great lot. I want to build there, but there's a problem with the lot. There's a telephone pole there. So I said, let's go take a look at it. So we go down, we take a look at it. We don't really have this survey staked like you really should. If you're buying land or even buying a property, always get a stake survey. We don't really stake survey because we don't know the area. We're both kind of new, we're sort of going into this blind. And so it's at the end of a dead end block. And we look at it and we're like, it should be okay. So we put up the money to buy the land, and he does the construction, and I figured for me as a broker, what's great is now I can run open houses, get customers, do the referrals, and to try to look for my next deal. So the funny part of this story is he builds the house, he puts the footprint in, and I'm looking at the telephone pole going, wow, that's going to be really a problem. And then we found out the reason the lot never sold was because the pole was in a spot that was blocking the driveway. It was making it like impossible. So once the footing, the cement went in, the house was beautiful. He built a fantastic house. I ran a ton of open houses. I got customers, got referrals. Hard to get new clients when you're in a new area. You got to really be there for, 5 years as a broker to get to kind of know people and what have you. But I was breaking into the neighborhood, and I realized that pole was just killing it. It was impossible. So after 6 months of getting open houses, I've got my mom running open houses, my stepdad doing open houses. We're going crazy trying to get this thing sold. It's like impossible. So Rob tells me that the original builder had told him it was going to cost $50,000 to move the telephone pole. So sure enough, they're doing electrical work down there, and the guy says to me, I asked him, how much would it cost to move this telephone pole? He's like, about $1,000. I'm like, well, what about the labor? He's like, no, you just buy the pole. We'll move it for you because obviously it's a problem. So for $1,000, we moved the pole, and the thing sold like in 2 minutes flat.
Wow.
And ironically, we ended up buying the multiple properties adjacent to it, one after the other. The good thing was because of the pole, I ended up becoming friends with everybody on the block. And literally 4 properties in a row ended up selling, and we partnered up with the builder to then build multiple properties. I mean, he built them, we ran the open houses, we broke into the neighborhood, and we started getting contacts like that. So sometimes it just takes one good break-in, getting in, and sometimes you're not maybe getting the greatest deal, but that leads to other deals.
Right. And a very important point you made here is just don't always trust the word of people who tell you information.
Oh.
I've had so many times where a listing agent went to sell a house. A buyer said, I think there's a foundation problem, hires a foundation company to do a bid. Now, a foundation company is going to do a free inspection and bid you $60,000 because they're always going to do the most conservative, overpriced fix. And so that agent takes that bid and tells all the prospective buyers there's a $60,000 fix. Instead, you hire an engineer, pay him $400 or $500 to tell you what's the cheapest way we could fix this to get it passed. And sometimes that number is $15,000.
Yeah, you gotta check, recheck, verify, and re-verify. Trust but verify.
That's correct. Trust but verify. Who said that?
I think you did, Bill. Was it one of the past presidents? I think
it was Ronald Reagan who said that.
Yes. Trust them but verify.
So you did your commercial deal, your office building. It sounds like you did some creative stuff with building houses. Tell me about another deal you did.
So as the years went on, I started realizing that, the deals on MLS that was sitting there were really not the greatest deals. They were good deals, but getting those off-market properties, the properties before they go on MLS was key. And I found that the top agents were really privy to that. So we came up with sort of a formula, if you will. I have to give credit to my mom's husband, Ed. He's the technical genius behind that. He helped formulate this. So we basically are going to run in a geography 200 to 300 comps. We're looking at all the properties that are out there in the vicinity and say price range that we're looking for. And sometimes we have to go a couple of zip codes out, a couple of zip codes in. It depends on what we're looking for. But we were looking for another investment property, another property to fund. And we found an area that we liked in North Carolina. And, it was just really hard to get a deal. So we ran our research report. We ran 300 comps in the area. We sorted that list by top agencies. So we knew the agencies that had the most transactions, thinking that the ones that have the most active transactions pending, listed for sale, are going to be the ones that are most likely to get the new inventory. So, technically speaking, they've got to put it on MLS first and then call their clients. Sometimes I think they got a window of like a day or two, but, they hit a button to enter it. And then the next button is they're making phone calls. So I had contacted one of the top local agents on the island, and she said to me, hey, I got something really hot. But, they've been around this one had been on the market for a long time, but she knew that they were really motivated and that they were going to be very flexible. So she was instrumental in helping me negotiate that deal. Even though I'm a broker, I'm always looking to use the top agent. She had known that there were things going on in the neighborhood that the average buyers out there in the market didn't know about. Flood insurance map was changing. She just had some inside information that made it really beneficial to us. So that was one of our most profitable transactions because the property had issues because of flood maps changing, and she knew that, and we were able to take advantage of that. So we're talking most of the times our transactions have at least a 20% margin, and that's what you're looking for. If you buy something for $400,000, you should be able to sell it for like 500. At least a 20% profit, even after putting renovation costs into it.
Right, right. And I know you said you scraped some houses and or built some houses on lots. Have you scraped house? I know a lot of people these days are going into neighborhoods where they're quote up and coming, and they buy a little cracker box just for the land value, scrape it, and build a McMansion.
Right.
It's been harder to do because the sellers know what's going on. So what would be a $400,000 house, these sellers are holding out for $650,000. So by the time you build your McMansion, you're not 20%, like you said, 10.
Yeah, it could be thin.
That people are missing.
The safest bet is your knowing the zoning codes, knowing if you can do subdivisions of lots. That first property we bought in where we bought the vacant lot, the neighbors, we actually bought 2 houses right next door to the property that we figured out that we were able to knock those 2 houses down and put 3 lots on them. So right off the bat, that was a huge benefit, just doing the subdivision on that. So I have to give credit to my builder who knew the surveyor. They made some phone calls and they said, wow, we can turn 2 lots into 3. I call that the hidden Mickey. That was probably one of our best, where it's like in Disneyland where they get the hidden Mickey Mouses. So if you know the zoning code, we bought 2 60 lots, 60 by 100 lots, and the zoning was for 40. So 60, 120 divided by 3, we were able to get 3 40-foot lots in and build 3 houses on them. And that was really, that's what made, the first deal was good. It was okay. But the next 3 in a row that we built was fantastic. And then we ended up buying the one next to that at the end. It was, once you start succeeding and start doing deals, all of a sudden you start doing more deals. But breaking into an area can be very hard. The quickest way to do it is finding out who the top players are, the top agencies and the top. So that's what we do. We do actually provide research reports if you guys are interested at topagentguarantee.com. If you want to know who the top 3 agencies are and the top 3 agents at those agencies are, we can provide that report for you. We run through typically about 300 comps in an area, and we identify who the top people are. And that gives you the access to those properties. That's what we find. And to the deals and to the knowledge and the team. They'll know the top attorneys, the top title people.
Right. But let's go back for a second. Something was just brilliant that you revealed, and everybody who was watching this, don't miss what he just said. 2 lots, scrape the houses, split it into 3, and build 3 houses. That's way more profitable than taking 1 house on 1 lot, scraping it and building a McMansion, because there's only so much, between the building costs and the size and the permits and everything. There's only so much money you can make doing that. And you have to get the lot at bargain basement. I remember myself, there's a neighborhood in Denver where I live called Cherry Creek. And there's a lot of just mansion after mansion. And there's this one little piece of crap house sitting there between 2 giant townhomes, 3-floor townhomes. And the lot's big enough to build the same thing. Now, those townhomes go for 1.4. The person was asking $650 for the cracker box on the lot. And I'm going, how do you make a profit there? Because at $650, it's going to cost you at least $500,000, if not more, to build what's comparable. So you're in for 1.150 and sell for 1.4 minus commissions and carrying costs. And there's no profit there. It's 0, because that house by itself, if the other stuff didn't exist, is worth 400. Yeah. But they were holding for 650. But what you're saying is that if we're like 2 houses together like that, you could scrape both and then divide the lots if zoning allows it. You have to, go to zoning and or use an expediter or someone who used to work at zoning and consult with them and get someone involved. That's probably a good idea, don't you think?
So yeah, the most well-connected agents are going to know the most well-connected expediters and the most well-connected attorneys. So that's why our formula works so well. And I have had them. I moved from New York to North Carolina, from Raleigh down to the coast. I was inland and then relocated down to the coast. And starting over each time is an absolute nightmare. Yeah. But the advantage is, having done this so many times and finding new areas, is that the shortcut to getting to the deals, and deals today are really hard. I'm not going to kid you guys. The inventory is down massively. The risks are the highest they've ever been. Interest rates, we have the threat of interest rates going up, no doubt. So if you can be an end user, your safest bet is if you can be an end user on the property, the risk is sort of off the table, and then you can catch the gain. And because if the music should stop, you're an end user on the property. So,
Right.
that really reduces risk.
Right. Just wait it out. Maybe build 2 houses on a lot or a duplex, scrape and build a duplex, live in one, rent the other, and then wait for them, for things to turn around. And maybe you could, sell it in a couple of years and get exclusion for at least part of that of the capital gains because of the 121 rule as your principal residence. Very, very, profitable thing to do. And that's, I don't know if you know this, in California passed a law allowing what we called accessory dwelling units, which is a mother-in-law.
Right.
In back. Denver's considering that as well, just because the shortage of land, they're going to start considering that. And that really raises the value of the property. If you can, instead of scraping it, just build another little mini cottage out back that is rentable. Well, you're not really supposed to rent it, or your mother-in-law is supposed to live there.
Yeah, you just check with the local zoning code, things that have
that allow you to do it, or Airbnb it, or something like that. Because you're allowed to Airbnb. I don't know if you know this, but Airbnb was a big thing in Denver. People bought multiple homes. They were making tons of money, $10,000 a month on a $600,000 home. The city of Denver said no more, unless you can't Airbnb anything unless it's a room in a house you live in. But an accessory dwelling unit is part of your home. So, that could be a real, real good thing if zoning allows it. If you're zoned for, R2 residential or whatever the equivalent is where you are, and you could build, maybe convert a garage into an apartment and Airbnb it for extra income, that raises the value of your property substantially.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So tell me about what we got time for one more deal. Give us another, whacked out.
It's always my fun. But like I said, my best deals have always been my primary residence. So the one that I did right before I left New York was another one, ironically, through a commercial broker. So he had connections. He had done a lot of deals, but he wasn't really a residential guy. So actually, this one was my mom. She had found, she knew the commercial broker on some dealings that she had with him. And he had turned her onto a property that we ended up buying. My wife and I ended up buying as a primary. And that one was one of our best because that was really a hidden gem. That was an off-market property. It was a little old lady going to Florida. The house was a complete wreck. So yeah, if you can do work, and we had one of our clients that was a contractor, I try not to get my hands dirty because, it's the money is not in doing the labor. The money is trying to find the deals and having the connections. Connections with the schools, connections with your friends, always asking people. I always ask, hey, by the way, you know anybody thinking about making a move? So I kind of trained everybody in my family to ask that, especially if you do somebody a favor, you do something kind to them and you've got enough rapport. Ask them, by the way, I'm in the market for a home. Do you know anybody who's thinking about making a move this year? And you'd be surprised by word of mouth how often that happens. So that one was an interesting one. That one needed, again, another total rehab. And I tried again, delegate it to somebody, usually somebody in the office. At the time, it was my mom. She had the contractor, and he went out and did all the renovations on the property, and we were able to turn around and sell. I wanted to do very well on that. That was one of our best ones. And again, off market from a top commercial guy. So getting the top 3 residential agents sometimes you can ask them, hey, do you know who's the top commercial brokers and the top local attorneys? And once you've got that dynamic list, so top 3 agents, top 3 attorneys, and you could ask the top agents who the top attorneys are and who the top commercial brokers are, because people don't really always think about commercial and residential jiving, and they don't. But that lack of a gap can be bridged, and you can find some amazing stories that are not really in the residential area, but are going to get there. So you kind of get to them through the commercial guys who ironically know, because the guy sometimes is talking about selling his business before he sells his home. You don't sell your home and leave, right? And then go to another state and then try to sell your business by remote control. Usually you're going to sell your building first, and then you're going to sell your residential properties, and you sell your home last. So that's a secret or a strategy that very few people even think about or talk about.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I like that a lot. Well,
can I talk about all the done things that I did?
Oh, we need for that one.
Because I've got plenty of those. I've made every mistake you can make.
Learning lessons. That's what we call learning lessons.
Well, that's in the book. If you pick up the book on Amazon, I think I have a link. I think I have a link in the website for that. I've got a whole list of all the stupid stuff, and you have to be careful. I have some videos on the website talking about the biggest mistakes that I've made and the dumb things you do. Because, it's not just the rah-rah, oh, my God, we did so great. There was a lot of pain and suffering and mistakes that we made. Ironically, never lost money on a deal. Even with all the dumb stuff I did, I bought a house that had no driveway and nowhere to park a car. Not only no garage, no driveway, and you couldn't park in front of the house. I mean, we bought it on auction. I bought it with an attorney at auction, and we had driven by the property before that, and it never dawned on us. It was like, you got to have the checklist of things you need, kitchen, bathroom, roof, garage, or driveway, somewhere to park the car. But we ended up selling it anyway to the neighbor, and we did okay with that one. And the supply quotient. If there's one thing that you guys take away from this, is that you need to know where the market's at, especially in this market, because people are saying, wow, it's going to turn, it's going to pop. But if there's no supply and the demand holds, it's not. It's going to continue. And the way you're going to know, and this is how I would make my claim to fame, is understanding the macroeconomics of the market, is knowing what is that supply, what is that demand, how are they relatively changing. So if you've got 100 properties for sale and you got 10 a month selling, you got a 10-month supply quotient. Prices are going down. If you've got 10 homes for, if you've got 100 properties for sale and you've got 100 a month selling, there's no inventory. That's like, what do you have, Bill, in Denver right now? What's the supply?
It's like 3 weeks.
3 weeks, right? 21 days, if I remember.
And by the way, so 6 months of supply is a normal market. And we've been at, 1 to 3 for many years now in Denver and in most parts of the country. But right now, January, the stats came out. It's 3 weeks.
Got to keep track of that. That is a huge thing. That's why with the properties that we owned, we sold our properties right before we wrote the book. Bill and I wrote the book anticipating, but nobody reads books anymore. It's like nobody reads books anymore. What a shame. But we wrote the book anticipating, I had anticipated the market really getting bad before the market really did. In fact, I think we had a hard time convincing the publisher to write the book about a down market, because he's like, the market's still good. But the markets do change, and the way is through the supply quotient. That's in the book on how to calculate that. Any good agent or appraiser will know. So like Bill said, that 6-month supply quotient, it's a balanced market. And right now, most markets have 1 to 2 months, which is like on fire. So if that changes significantly, and the only way that's going to change is with new inventory coming on the market.
And it's not. The builders they can't build them fast enough.
They're having trouble getting supplies. You talk to these
they're
builders every day.
Getting supply. I was just hearing Maria Bartiromo this morning was talking about, the housing market, the new starts are down by 4%, meaning new builds are down by 4%. And it might be a sign of the market turning. And I'm like, you freaking idiot. It has to do with they can't get lumber.
Right. I heard OSB today. One of my builders I spoke to this morning tells me that he just can't build. And I'm sitting there scratching my head going, oh my goodness, what are we going to do for the next couple of years? Because
and the challenge is materials. Because of the cost of materials and the cost of land. I talked to a couple of developers and I said, what's the minimum size house that you have to build to break even? Because you can't build a 2,000 square foot house because the cost of the subdivision and the plumbing and the sewers and the roads and the bribing politicians. I mean, there's a fixed cost. When you get to 2x4s and drywall, it's nominal cost. Why would you build a 2,000 square foot house when you can build an 8,000? So I said, what's the minimum house you have to build to break even? He says 5,500 square feet. That is unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's hard. That's why if you guys out there, you got to play it safe. Make sure you keep your margins. Make sure you understand the materials and the time it's going to take to build. A lot of the builders are telling me they're having trouble getting supplies. The sheathing that goes on the outside of the house, the appliances, cabinets. That's why if you're an end user, that's the safest bet out there. Right. That's the safest because if the market should say comes to a halt for some reason, at least you're an end user on the property, and that's your safe bet.
Right. All right. So last thing, your service there, we have on the bottom there, top agent guaranteed, and you're offering
TopAgentGuaranteed.com. Free report shows you who the top 3 agents are at the top 3 companies everywhere in the country, whether you're buying or selling. Especially if you're selling, you want to not waste time with what they call the amateur agents that claim they're the best. You want to know who's got the clientele, who's really doing the deals, who's really actively in the market, because the number 1 agent last year may not be the same number 1 agent this year.
That's right. Yeah. And for buying properties as well, you want.
Especially for buying properties.
Right.
You're going to get access to the properties. We'll call it the minute it comes on the market. I got a list here. I know Bill didn't want me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Did I put it away? So the top, this is a list of all the properties that have sold. One we ran in January. A property sells 7 minutes on the market, 11 minutes, 27 minutes, in hours. These aren't even days. And some of these are multi-million-dollar properties. Look at this. Just goes on. This is hitting the market and sold in hours. So, they can sell. Their pocket listings are not legal, but man, these brokers, they're all doing them. Look at this. These are all properties all over the country selling in literally under 24 hours. How is it possible? It goes on the market, it goes on the contract in minutes or hours or literally in an hour.
Right.
That's because the
agent is blasting his short list before it actually hits the MLS.
Right.
And that's why I tell people, if you're going to buy properties on the MLS, good luck in this market.
Yeah,
you have the motivated for sale by owner, or should be for sale by owner, foreclosures, estates, divorces, the ones that haven't yet listed it on the market. Because once it's on the MLS, unless it's a bad listing, it's mislisted, it's way overpriced. It's the example I told you earlier with the $60,000 foundation that really is only 10 to fix. So without those exceptions, just going on and saying, wow, I got an email from a broker that there's a bank-owned property for sale, and they're asking only 80% of the asking price, and by the time you call and make an offer, they're laughing at you because they got 25 offers above asking price.
Right. And you got to motivate the agent. You got to know the macro market. You got to know not only the zip code you're in, which we provide this in our report, you got to know who the top players are, what the supply quotient is in that zip code, and the zip codes touching it, and the county. So we go from macro to micro. Macro would be the county, or the zip code and the zip codes that touch it would be the normal macro market. And then the micro market would be that specific price range, price bracketed. And that's what we do in our report. We look at the not only just the subject property, we're looking at the competition up and down from that price point. Because if it's a $500,000 property, it's not competing with a $5 million property, so that can be a completely different market. So you need to understand what's the condition of that market, because it's very local in nature. You can have one zip code next to another zip code and be completely 2 different types of markets. Believe me, completely different.
I know when CNBC says the housing market X, the housing market Y, it's nonsense, because there is no housing market nationally, really. It's micro-local. It's neighborhood by neighborhood.
Although lately it's all moving together because this avalanche of demand is so powerful.
The supply limitations, interest rates, tax policy, those things do affect, the broad market. But supply and demand is the bottom line, and that changes from zip code to zip code.
Right. And that's why people have to, before you start investing and bidding, you need to monitor what it is, not just now in this point in time, but how it's moving. And I would say monthly. I would do the numbers monthly. And it's funny because we had somebody in my office that ran the stats for me. She did them all the time. She was really good at it. And she would give me a daily report. And you would see it changing, getting stronger and stronger. And everybody was so negative on the market. This is when the pandemic first hit. And I'm looking at those numbers before everybody. And I knew that the market was getting stronger quickly. Now, is it going the other way? Some markets are softening. Some are still continuing stronger. Florida's still very strong. New York, because of tax issues, that's kind of like wobbly. California wobbly in some areas. Texas on fire. Colorado on fire. So it depends. You got to really go to the state, down to the county, down to the zips around the zip itself, and then the neighborhood. And once you get those numbers and just a general picture of that, then you can determine how aggressive you want to be on the bidding. Very important.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing this great information and these great stories, Ray. I love listening to you talk about not only the stories, but the numbers and the math and the theory. It's just, we'll have to have you back again to talk about more and more your deals, because I've seen your file cabinets and you've got like different. So thank you.
With clients.
Guaranteed.com. realestatefinance.com and get your free report for your local area. One report you get for free for your zip code. And we'll have you on again. Thanks a lot, Ray.
Yeah.
And thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks, Bill.
God bless.